Welcome guys to Coronado Customs. Today we're going to be working on a Dodge Ram 2018. Got a couple of things going on it. First things first, we actually have a rear light setup we're going to do right here into the bumper. That's going to be the first thing. Next thing, we're going to be doing some oh, gotta get it unlocked. We're gonna be doing some centralized lighting. So basically, we're gonna be running a control panel versus running like switches and things like that, just to kind of make it look clean. So what you're looking at right here, we're gonna put that little gauge pod, that little pod right here. It's gonna have all sorts of different options for the lighting: backup lighting, forward lighting, hood lighting. We're gonna have some strobe and some ambers there as well. Now in the front, got a couple of different things going on. One right up here on the hood, we're gonna be putting a couple of pods there. And we could have gone with a light bar up here, called it done, but we're actually gonna end up doing some pods. Reason for it is, one, the multiple light pod situation is going to look a little cleaner. Two, we were looking to get these ambers set up so when the vehicle's running, we can run the ambers. Kind of just gives some accent lighting to the truck itself. Now, we do have some support braces here that we could actually tie into. I think I have the piece of metal I'm going to use across for the support. And then this actually has a few ways to be wired up. One, you got the actual spot beam on here. You have the ambers. You have a strobe. And then you have, is it ambers, strobe, the white light, and that's it. Those three options. So we're going to end up putting 6 of these pods in here. We have a total of 6. We're going to have 2 right up on the hood, and then the 2 backup ones. So for the control panel, we're using an access panel like this. What's nice about it, it's one cord. It runs over to a box like this through one connection, hooks up to the battery, ignition, and stuff like that. The beauty about this, built-in relays, fuses, and each termination point on here. Cleans up your installation a lot. You don't have separate relays just kind of hanging out, things like that. This is what's going to go to the left of the steering wheel, and this is going to control the strobe, the ambers, the and the general lighting for the backup, the hood lights, and all those systems. So the nice thing about the control panel is that it comes with a bunch of stickers like this. We can pick and choose what we want to word it. For the support bracket on here, what I'm thinking is actually just using something like this. It's an L-shaped bracket. It has a bunch of holes on it already. So what I'm thinking about doing is notching, cutting off the excess material. We're looking at about 26 inches from here to there. So measure it, center out 26 inches, cutting out this little section, leaving a bracket on the side that we could actually bend over and use as a mounting bracket. So as far as the wiring goes, there is 4 wires on each one. We have our ground, and depending on what we want to engage, whether it be the light, the spotlight itself, the strobe, or the amber, we have 4 wires, and unfortunately these wires didn't come with any type of wire harness or anything like that, so we're going to have to fabricate that from the beginning. I'm going to kind of run these into like a daisy chain, mount them on, size them, get everything wired up once I got it all mounted, and then from there we're going to have one termination point, which is probably going to be on this side somewhere, where if this needs to come off for any reason, we'll have a 4-pin connector that connects the entire light bar that we are creating there into another harness that we're going to run up and into that control panel. So in the back of the vehicle, we're actually be doing these slightly different lights. They're flush mount lights. We'll also have to create a harness for these, figure out the routing to the front. We're more or less thinking somewhere in here, in between the park sensors. Now I'm gonna go and start gridding everything out, and in gridding everything out, kind of find the center in between these two and how high and everything. I'm gonna go and use some masking tape to do so and get it all squared away. Now, one thing to keep in mind when I'm doing this, I want to make sure I position the light, one, where it's going to be cosmetically pleasing to the eye, but I also need to keep in mind as this bumper comes down, the angle of that light's going to change. So I want to make sure that I kind of figure out where I'm going to get the most benefit of ground cover and light that's going to give me some distance if I choose to use them as some sort of work light. Let's say someone breaks down, we have to use the vehicle, pull someone out of the desert, whatever the case is. We have enough light to see what we're backing up into on the ground and to see what possibly use them as work lights. Another thing I want to make sure before I cut is I want to make sure in the back that I'm going to have the clearance for the light, making sure nothing's going to get in the way. I have space to work and I have clearance for the light to sink in and go flush into the bumper. Alright, so I got my basic measurement down. Between here and here, I'm 3 3/4 coming down, and between here and here, it's 6 1/4 for the midpoint. So now I'm going to start masking everything up, gridding it up on both sides, and get it ready for cut. So we're day 2, finally getting back to this. Got everything gridded out around this point, got everything squared off, ready to start cutting. So show you the difference. So we went ahead and got everything cut out, drilled the holes for the mounting, got everything that was bare metal, put some paint on it, and got it mocked up for you to see. Here you go. Alright, we're going to start on the second side. Couple of things. Now to cut the hole, I'm using a cutoff wheel, like so. It is a Ryobi. I know for all of you guys that are Ryobi haters, I do also have Milwaukee. They're made by the same company. Now, the reason I use it, obviously, the price point. Second, as long as you're going brushless, you're not going to have any issues with them. This does quick work of what I'm trying to do. It is directional. I don't have to worry about air tools, bringing the line out here. That's why I stick to it. For most of the cut, I'm using that cutoff wheel. For the edges, I'm using this little oscillating tool. And then if I went a little offline, grinder to kind of finish off the edges. So that's pretty much what I'm using. I am using step bit to make the holes for mounting, and we're set to go. Let's get started. Alright guys, so to apply some paint on here, you just want something that's going to have some sort of corrosion resistance. This vehicle is going to reside in the desert, so we don't have issues with rust in the area. But just to make sure your job is complete, I'm using the cut end of a solo cup. I'm going to spray some spray paint into it. Here, you could also use like a paint marker. I use sometimes these disposable brushes. I ran out of some daubers, so you could also possibly use like a Q-tip. Harbor Freight sells some wooden ones that are a little bit more durable, that work great for this application. So you have some options. Alright, so now that we got the holes cut out in the rear bumper, we need to start thinking about the wiring. These right here obviously didn't come with any termination points or anything like that. It's just the wire. Now, I'm going to be using these these waterproof connectors. 2-pin, lock in. Now I'm not just going to connect these there and make this long pigtail. I'm actually going to shorten this a little bit That way it's not as long, it's a little cleaner. I want to make sure when I'm putting these in and where I'm running the wires that they're not going to interfere if the vehicle ever has to be serviced for any reason. Some of my background is in working with body shops, doing wire repair and things like that. So kind of understanding the way the vehicle comes apart will help me decide how I'm going to run the wiring up to the front. So just something to keep in mind when you're doing your wiring. Alright, so I've decided to cut down these to about 6 inches and the pigtails 2.5. Now that should keep it nice and clean, nice and short, and move forward from there. Now I ended up using these on the light. It is the female connection, but it has the male pins on there. Reason I'm using this on the car side is because if anything happens where something falls in, let's say you get a piece of debris of metal or something like that inside here, it could short out. Here it's harder for it to short out because it's the female version of it, so you're not going to have that issue. So just kind of little things to think about as you're doing your build here. Now I'm going to end up soldering these points together. You do have a few options when you're doing this as well, where you can get the connector and separate pins and build it yourself. You could do that, but if you don't crimp them properly, you're gonna have issues where pins are sliding out, things like that. I misplaced my crimping tool, which is why I'm going with the pigtail instead. Now I am gonna solder them, but I'm gonna use marine shrink tubing. Basically this has an adhesive inside of it. When you heat it up and shrink it, you'll see the sealant ooze out the sides. So it's going to make sure I have a watertight connection, not going to get any type of corrosion, and we're just going to have a better connection overall. Alright, so I kind of got everything already prepped. I put the shrink tubing obviously over the wiring so I could slide it over the point where we actually joined those two together. I also added a larger piece of shrink tubing. Did I say solder? Shrink tubing. Put a larger piece that I'm going to actually wrap the entire piece with. That way it just looks a little bit more finished. And then we'll go ahead and throw a little bit of loom on there, make it look nice and beautiful. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I got everything soldered up. The double wall, single wall, and got that ready to go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to throw some loom on there. It's called split loom. And as we throw this on there, what we want to do on the end, especially the one near the connector, we want to figure out more or less where this is going to end. And then once we figure that out, we're going to use some cloth tape just because it's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to wrap the tape around the wire first, give ourselves a little bit of play, bring this over, and then go ahead and wrap it, and then we'll go ahead and cut it, and then you'll have a nice finished end that's not going to slide or move on you. So now that we have all that done, this is how it looks, fully completed, ready to install. Alright, so I just finished looking up the circuit. I'm trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to proceed. Now I do want the rear bumper lights to be able to turn on with the switch panel that we're putting in, but I also want them to be able to be utilized when the vehicle is switched into reverse. So I want to make sure obviously that we're not going to be backfeeding, where we're going to get signal for it and things like that. A few things to consider: a lot of Mopar vehicles use pulse width modulation for their lighting, so you don't get a true 12 volt signal. So sometimes running relays, things like that, could be an issue. We might have to diode isolate it so we don't get any type of backfeeding. What I'm looking at in these diagrams is, because it has its own fuse and things like that and relay to switch on when the vehicle's put in reverse, we're probably going to use the tow circuit, because it's completely separate from the rest of the vehicle, and that's going to give us a true 12-volt signal. And then because it is relayed, we won't be getting any backfeeding when we decide to run the lighting off the switch panel itself. So that's how we're going to proceed. Alright, so now we're working in the back of the vehicle. I've went ahead and pulled down the spare tire, and just to kind of get some clearance to the wiring. I am using my power probe. Reason I'm using that is because it gives me an audible alert when I get power. Now, in going under here, I was looking at this wiring. Now this truck, the schematic says that the wiring is black for the backup signal. I was looking at this entire mess of wiring. I unplugged this off of that portion right there. That's where that actually mates to the rear of the bumper, so you can hook up your trailer. Now, in looking at this, they connected a T-harness. It's kind of hard to see. There it is. They put a T-harness on here that runs up that way, and that is going to be for fifth wheel. So this little connector right here pretty much allows them to run both. So when I tested the black wire here on this wiring, it was a constant 12. So I had to go to the wiring that's part of the vehicle. I have that tapped in right now, and I'm going to check it. Now I'm in the vehicle. I'm going to test that reverse circuit. I'm not going to start it. It's a diesel truck. It's going to be too loud. I won't be able to hear it. So I'm just going to put it ignition mode on. I got the parking brake engaged. Hear that? Reverse, park, reverse, neutral, drive. There we go. That's our circuit. So I rather tap into that T-harness instead of the factory wiring. I could put a connection point on it. I rather do it into the aftermarket wiring than the factory wiring. So in order to find out what wire I need, I'm gonna unplug them, test for continuity across the points, and see what color on the T-harness is the one I need. That way I could tap into that one. We keep the integrity of the factory wiring in place. Alright, so this is the factory wiring side on this side. Here's where the aftermarket T-harness goes in. I unplugged this, and I tested continuity to that wire, and I found out it was a center pin. Plug this back in, use this little back probe with my meter, and I tested the center pin, and I did get continuity. On that center pin, it is this red wire. So it went from black to red. Alright, so got everything wired up for the most part back here. Got the lights mounted. They run into this connector right here. This connector runs up and over. Now I am using this dual conductor wire that's insulated. Reason I chose this is so I don't have to tape the wire or dress it or anything like that as I run it under the vehicle. Went and tapped into the wiring right here, soldered it, double wall shrink tubed, put a stress relief right here, put a pigtail in case it does have to come off. This right here provides the auxiliary lights to turn on when I hit the reverse. As it runs into here, runs out and over. Now this runs over here to this section. Now in this section right here, it goes into the other light. And then there is a pigtail for the ground right there. And then the other wire runs up to the front. Now because of the distance, I am running both conductors as power from the front from that control panel, because of the distance and the amperage that's going to create. So there you go. Now I do have the bundle of wire that I still need to run up to the front, but the termination points, the lights do work right now. They do turn on with the normal backup lights. Got those up and going. Alright, so now we're running the wiring from the rear up to the front. Now a few things to take note. Be careful how you're running the wiring. you want to run it along factory wire harnesses, and then make sure you kind of just follow that line and run accordingly. Zip tie as you make your way across up to the front. There's some of the harness peeking out right up over there. So that's the harness that we're pretty much taping up, zip tying up to the front. This way, the vehicle's ever in any type of accident or needs to be repaired, everything comes off the way it should. All right, so in looking at the switch pod, you have this harness that could run down or up, but not to the side. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put a hole where this is, run it through, and then mount this directly there. Now this was designed to mount here and then to mount here to another panel, but that's just gonna be too much. So I already got the holes marked up for the screws and the one for the wiring. I'm gonna make those right now. So I got this control unit mounted. It's ready to go. It has a little single connector that comes right here. I gotta run this the extension out to the front, and then I have to find an ignition source for this. Now I don't know if I need if I should do it in here or try to find it under the hood. So that's where we're at right now. So now as far as under the hood, I'm choosing the driver's side. A couple of reasons for that. I'm going to show you. One, I have a little bit more room. Air boxes on that side, second batteries on that side. Here we have the original fuse panel battery. So we're looking at mounting it somewhere right here. You could open it, access those fuses, things like that. Reason for it as well, there's a couple of grommets. It's kind of hard to see. So looking down in here, let's see if we can get this lighting just right. So looking down over here, we have a blank plate right here. We can drill a hole into this, put our own grommet in. Also, we have some existing grommeting that goes through. I have a special tool that allows you to pierce it like a needle and pass the wiring through without damaging any of that. So we have some options when it comes to that. So when I was mounting that control panel, the screws that came with it were too shallow. So I had to improvise, and luckily I keep these little boxes. I can't open that. The screws, and I have them in different categories: coarse, smooth, fine. So they all have kind of their own little thing. Alright, so working on the hood lights, let me walk you through exactly what we're doing here. Now, we use these adapters that kind of pinch onto the hood. That way we don't have to make any type of holes. Checked for clearance to make sure I could route the thing there, the wiring through there. It's not going to get damaged. And I checked when I closed the hood just to make sure that none of this was going to get in the way. Went and anchored the connector there just so make sure it wouldn't eventually work its way the other way. So got that. Same thing on the other side. There we go. I was just going to get them wired up to that control unit and we'll be set. Alright, so kind of got the front bumper lights mocked up. Let me show you what that looks like. The other ones up top. Here, there. I already made the holes and everything. I need to still wire everything up, but that's just kind of the pressure fitted in at the moment. I still need to fine tune the adjustment on each side and then get it all bolted in. Okay, so this is pretty much how I made the bracket. Cut this section off right there, bent this over. Spaced out the lights, wired 3 pods together. So these 3 are together to this connector, these 3 are together, loop back around to this connector. Now here I'm going to join the strobes of one, the ambers of the other, and the LED there, and then the grounds are all going right there. And then these pigtails right here that plug in there are going to go from here. Now if you look at this carefully, there's 3 pairs of wires right there. It's kind of hard to see. One pair is going to be strobe, one pair is going to be ambers, and one pair is going to be the spots. So that way there's plenty of wire for the entire setup, and we don't run into any issues with heat or whatnot. Alright, so I changed it up a little bit. The one that I'm running together with 2 leads is going to be just the spots, because that's really what's going to be consuming most of the power. The ambers and the strobes are a lot lower consumption, so I'm just running a single lead just to kind of save on some wire. Wiring is done. The fuse box has power that goes to here, has a single ground. We have the ground for the hoods also coming straight to the battery. That wires off into these plugs and that harness that goes across. Front lights are wired up. The bracket is the only thing that I left that needs paint. That's just for another day. But the entire system is all wired up. Let's take a look how it looks. Got the switch panel set up. We're going to go and run ambers. This is ambers with hood lights and bumper lights. And finally the strobe. The ambers and the spot could be run independent of each other. The hood and the bumper are independent of each other, but all ambers are together, all strobes are together. This is the truck running with the ambers. This is the ambers and spots. These are the strobes. Here are the rear lights we put in the bumper. The control panel we installed to make it all work. Alright guys, so it's time to wrap up the video. We're going to do a just final walk around, how everything looks in the daylight, so you guys get a full picture of the completed project. Here we go. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Appreciate you. Please like and subscribe. And appreciate you guys. You guys have a wonderful week.